Well, as I usually say, great games at your table. This is Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG, and this is Game Master's Soapbox. I want to thank you very much for being here tonight, and I hope to bring some information to you that would be helpful for you and the games that you play. I want to apologize first for the speech pattern I have. As I have mentioned in the last couple of days, I am suffering from a bout of Bell's palsy, and it causes me to speak more out of one side of my face than the other. So I try to be as energetic and dynamic as I can be, but only half of my face is contributing to the benefit. So, having said that, I want to talk tonight about things that I've learned from 48 years of RPGs. And it's these are the very things that I advocate for everyone else. And I realize that sometimes I know that I have a problem with speaking, pontificating, talking down to people sometimes because I sometimes come across as the authority and all of that. And I want to kind of step away from that for a bit and talk about what the games have done for me. And uh, I could argue that I talked so much as a young man that the Bell's palsy is a result of my brain thinking too hard, but that's just silliness. The topics that I've got here on the list are pretty much a short list of the things that I consider to have been useful in my life that I have picked up or developed during role play games. And since I have done it for 48 years, I would say that it has been a major contributing factor for all of those years. So, the first thing I want to talk about is perspective and paradigm. As a youngster, 11-year-old, playing a role play game, my initial perspective was that it was a great place to consider living another life or living in a different body and doing different things. And early on, the personas that I played were of a broad spectrum of races and species because, of course, you want to experiment and try all kinds of different things and different ways of approaching situations. And it's really an effective way to consider playing roles. So if you are considering a life in the theater, if you want to do TV and motion pictures and that kind of thing, role playing is a great starter set for understanding some direction and figuring out how to communicate, how to think outside of your own parameters and consider what might happen if you were somebody other than you are. Having said that, the perspective that one gets while playing a role play game is really dependent upon how much you invest in the game yourself. If you are only playing it at a top level, looking down at the persona or the character that you're playing as if it was something you could take or leave, you play it as if it was not a real thing or a real person, it makes your play style suffer considerably. And so it's important to endeavor, at least, to make the game as real as you can within the framework of the mechanics of the game. And when you change from one game system to another, perhaps it will affect the paradigm from which you approach it. I mean, if you are playing a character in a medieval fantasy setting, that's considerably different than if you were playing in a 1920s ancient Eldrin lore, Elder lore, Cthulhu type adventure. Your perspective on the game and the perspective on the conditions of play will change from time to time. And in any case, these situations where you play it in a reality or a thought processes for another player, another person, it causes you to consider different levels of empathy, different levels of emotion, different levels of interaction. And this heightened sense of awareness tends to really help to bring a realism to the game, even as you are considering the physical options that a player might take. Now, To a lesser extent, I suppose you could say that your awareness does increase because you're going to be learning vocabulary that allows you to convey your interest in the story. You'll be able to learn phrases that the game master will respond to that will get you a better volume of information or whatever. But the um, mechanisms for play are really internalized in the case of role play because when you are experiencing more empathy towards other persons in the story, it means that you are being more personally touched by the information in the story, and therefore it's a really a positive feedback loop that causes your gameplay experience to be much more effective. Now, this does feed somewhat into your problem solving, but really the issue of improved problem solving doesn't come down to dice rolls. As a matter of fact, if you are playing a role play game and the dice rolls are making the difference between your success and failure, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. So consider pressing your game master to create actual solve problems that need to be resolved by actual decisions that the players make instead of just a default condition die roll. I know that in some people's minds, a role play game is an ROLL game instead of an ROLE game, and therefore they expect a dice roll to resolve any conflict or any condition that comes up that they personally don't immediately see. And for example, they want to solve a riddle by rolling a dice instead of actually listening to the terms of the riddle and trying to solve it for themselves. And this is kind of unfortunate because it deprives the player of the realism that's available when they are actually resolving the conflicts in the game through the role play. What this really means is that the player is not getting the opportunity to be situationally engaged. They're not actually moving the story even a little bit on the needle by what they do in game, but they are depending heavily on the advances the character has made in the past, and therefore the numbers, the numeric values. And as they increase, then the player feels like they are increasing the social or their situation in the game. And it could be farther from the truth. If you're succeeding based on die rolls, once you fail a die roll, then that undermines your perceived advancement. All of this really comes down to saying that when you are a role player, you need to have your imagination activated. You need to be considering what the place looks like, smells like, tastes like, what's going on in the environment, what conditions are in play that you have to take into account, what villains are present and what kind of actions they may have taken previously, and so on. And this improved imagination will give you more options, more alternatives for accomplishing, and that therefore makes the game exploration more dynamic. And this is important when you're dealing with, for example, the concepts of personality and identity. I've had several players in the last year or so who chose to play uh, a, a gender that a sex that they weren't, or a race. Obviously, in the case of role play games, many of them are fictional. So playing a different race is not a big challenge, but actually playing as if you are of that race. That does make the play more dynamic and associates more with the culture. And these cultural issues are really what I'm talking about when I'm saying the exploration of identity issues. You are looking at not only what they believe, but why they believe it. And that's really integral to the player experience so that they will feel what they would be driven to feel by the actions and the events that are in the game. When a player comes to the table and they've got an agenda and a series of objectives and goals that they want to accomplish, that sometimes feels like that should be logical and whatever, but many times the desire to achieve goals and make course corrections in the story have more to do with what the player brings to the table and expects to have become part of the story itself. And so there's kind of a push me, pull you aspect of it that you certainly want to endorse the idea of setting goals and trying to accomplish them, but you don't want to be in such a way that you deprive the story of its own life by saying something that happened in the past, because that affects the future as well. So it's important to allow the players to have agency and purpose within the game without giving them so much license that they hang themselves or deprive themselves of the excitement and thrills of something that they want to have played out. And all of this really comes down to your ability with your mental gymnastics. If you're not able to not only accept the world as it is, but figure out how to move yourself within it, how to motivate and drive yourself forward and take advantage of the story and the very things that happen around you, and make a picture, make a 3D image, if you will, in your mind of what's going on, you're reducing your ability to really enjoy the game. So, in my case, I've really learned how to create not only a dynamic setting, but a realistic environment so that my players can actually feel the push of the ground, so to speak, when they make actions. And really, the point is that playing RPGs does affect your real time conscientiousness, your awareness of what's going on in the world above and beyond the tabletop, and you're more attuned to the condition and the attitudes and such of the people that are around you, which makes you a well rounded and more involved individual. We are at 11:10. That's one of the shortest I've done recently, but uh, my muscles in my face are particularly fatigued because I've run games for the last 2 days, and I haven't seen as much restorative advancement as I would like. So I'm going to go ahead and call the stream at this point. If you have anything you'd like to add, feel free to leave a comment either here on Twitch or at the comment section at NycosRPG on YouTube. And if you like what we're doing, make sure you follow us here. Also, give us a subscribe on YouTube, because there's no charge for that, and it does keep you updated on whenever I make new videos. I generally put videos out every night of the week, so if you've got something to say or want to talk about, I am always here at 11 p.m. Pacific. I want to thank you for your time and have a great night. This is Jonathan Albin, NycosRPG and Game Master